So today we're going to talk a little bit about traveling. We're getting into the travel season. We're getting into holidays. Thanksgiving is fast approaching. I don't have any huge plans for this Thanksgiving, but a lot of people do. A lot of people will be flying and driving, and so we're just going to do a couple stories. Kind of kick off. Am I the asshole? Traveling and getting through the holidays edition. So Cheryl, why don't you go ahead and you can start us off. What's your story?
So this one's not really holiday related, but it is travel related, and I thought it was a very interesting story.
All right.
Um, the title is Am I the asshole boarding the plane and leaving without my wife?
Ooh.
Yeah, so that obviously grabbed my attention right away.
Yeah.
Here we go. My wife, female 43, and I, male 47, have a daughter, female 21, who goes to college out of state. We will call my wife Meg and my daughter Jess. Jess is in her junior year of college. Over the summer, she was employed by her university and was able to stay in the dorms. After summer, she was moving out of the dorms and into her own apartment off campus. Meg and I live in the PNW, Pacific Northwest. Jess goes to school on the East Coast. We usually go to visit Jess a couple times throughout the semester, typically parents' weekend and move out day. She also comes home during the holidays. Let me start by saying that traveling with my wife is not a great experience.
Ooh.
I am very type A. I like to have everything organized and make sure that we get where we need to be early, especially when traveling. My wife is the opposite, very go with the flow, and we will get there when we get there. I do my best to meet in the middle, but not when traveling by plane.
Yeah.
Last year, during Parents' Weekend, Meg and I were going to fly out to see Jess. Our flight was at 10 a.m. Our airport isn't huge, but not a tiny airport either. I told
Okay.
my wife that we needed to be at the airport 90 minutes early, and we live about 30 minutes from the airport. 90 minutes early is a good time to
I
get.
agree. I think that's a
That's
fair
pushing
window.
it to me, though, but
I
okay,
mean,
let's.
I sometimes push it to an hour, but 90, I would, for my clients, I would always advocate 90 minutes. That's good.
Or
That's fair.
more. I'm in the or
Yeah.
more camp. This
Or
being
more.
said, I wanted to leave at the very latest by 8. 8 o'clock for a 10 a.m. flight, that stresses me out. But since we would also need to park and walk a little bit, he wanted to give them extra time. I, of
Yes.
course, got up at 6 to make sure everything was ready and accounted for. My wife does not like to get up early. It took me attempting to wake her up 5 times before she eventually got up at 7:40. Then wanted to make coffee, shower, eat a bowl of cereal. Let's just
Hello.
say
The flight
we
is.
we didn't leave the house until 9. It
Oh,
ended up
damn.
being busier at the airport than normal, likely due to many colleges having parents' weekend, and it
Okay.
took so long to get through the security that we missed our flight.
Hmm.
Rightly so, the airline refused to refund our ticket. We were able to get new tickets, but not until the next day, and missed Friday afternoon and Saturday morning with our daughter. Jess was disappointed to say the least.
Right.
Fast forward to now. We were flying down for a long weekend to help her move. We took one flight from our town to a bigger town nearby, then fly from there to my daughter's college town. Again, it was a long morning of me pushing my wife, getting her to move along. And due to the last airport mishap, I wanted to make sure I told her we needed to leave extra early as not to miss the flight again.
Makes sense.
Right. We got there on time with a bit of time to spare, and my wife was annoyed. Kept going on and on about how now we just have to sit and wait for 45 minutes for them to start boarding. That's not a long wait, but
That's
okay.
really
I
not. That's
digress.
really not.
We took our first flight and landed in the connecting city at a much larger airport. We only had about a 1 hour layover. We got off the plane at 9:15 and our next plane started boarding at 9:40. That's not an hour layover, dude.
Well, maybe the flight was an hour later and
Okay,
they board early.
okay.
That's what I'm thinking.
That's very little. We had to take multiple rails to get from where we landed to our terminal. We got to our terminal and had about 15 minutes until our plane was set to board.
Yeah, that's tight.
It is tight. My wife tells me that she wants to get coffee. There was a little market next to our terminal that sold hot food and coffee. I asked if she wanted me to go grab it for her. No, I want Starbucks, she said. Well, Starbucks was a ride away and a little bit of a walk. I told her we couldn't do that. We didn't have enough time. She stated that we had enough time, and if I wouldn't go with her, she would go by herself. I tried to discourage her, but she was determined. She walked away at a brisk pace for her and said she would be back in time. 15 minutes went by and she was nowhere to be seen. They
Hmm.
started calling boarding groups. I called my wife, hoping she was nearby. She didn't answer. They called a few more groups, then called ours. In a panic, I called my wife again 3 times. Finally, on
Okay.
the last call, she answered and said she was on her way. It was a long line and she had to wait. I told her they were almost done with boarding and she needed to hurry up. I waited by the gate, but the attendant said they would need to shut the gate in 2 minutes. I waited and waited, but she didn't show up. I tried to plead with her to wait a couple minutes, but she insisted that she couldn't, so I boarded the plane. A few minutes later, my wife calls me saying that the attendant won't let her on. They had already removed the boarding ramp at that point. She told me I needed to tell them to let me off the plane to be with her, and I said no. It is not fair to do this again to Jess. I said, I told you we didn't have time, but you decided to go anyways. I told her to go purchase a new ticket for the next flight and I would see her when she arrives. She got to Jess's school and seemed unbothered by the whole situation and didn't even really talk about it. I thought maybe she realized it was her fault and I just wanted to drop it. Boy, was I wrong. We are now home and she hasn't talked to me since the trip over a week ago and is insisting that I am an asshole. So, am I the asshole?
When I heard the title, I I'm not one to assume, but I was thinking that he was going to be the asshole. But as the story proceeded, I don't think he is. I honestly don't, because I think he's kind of caught in the middle between trying to, get her where she needs to be, and then be there for the daughter. So he's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, and she sounds like very underprepared in my opinion, and she just doesn't. Flights are flights, they leave with or without you. So if it was her choice to go to Starbucks when she could have just gone, and it was already the next day. So no, I don't think he was an asshole.
I
I
don't
probably
think
would have
so
done the same
either.
thing. Yeah.
And it just the 90 minutes alone only stressed me out. Like I want to get there. I would rather wait an hour. I would rather wait 90 minutes for my flight, be there and have a 90-minute wait than be rushed or even when I'm sitting at the terminal, sitting at the gate, and it's boarding, I'm still terrified I'm going to miss it. I don't know what it is. There's just this thing. But I do
Yeah.
want to give you an update to see. So do in this instance, do we think the wife is the asshole?
Well, I mean, I don't know that she's an asshole. I'd say she sounds kind of spoiled, and she doesn't really value. I mean, I, I think he's not an asshole. That's
Correct.
what I'm
Okay,
gonna
I
say.
agree with you. I think he's not an asshole, but let me give you this update and then there's two updates and let me give you the first one. So, oh, where'd my update go? So he mentions a lot of people had responded and they had asked a couple questions. So these are his answers in response to the questions.
Okay.
They apparently asked how she acts in other situations and he says she generally doesn't have any issues. She has never wanted to be late for work or anything like that. Just seems like travel is a poor area for her. Um,
Okay. Fair
and
enough.
someone had considered, does she have ADD, ADHD? And he said, she really shows no other signs. He says, I saw a post implying that my wife, this was weird. Actually, I meant to skip this part, but might have an addiction of some sort. I'm not sure how that would line up, but I don't see that being a possibility. Yeah, an addiction to coffee, caffeine, maybe, but that was
An
far out
addiction to
left field.
Starbucks. It's real.
Yeah. So here is the kicker. Here's what was interesting. Jess is not Meg's daughter. I was married, he says, I was married once before and my wife unfortunately passed away due to complications during Jess's birth. I remarried Meg when my daughter was 6. My daughter made a comment that Meg doesn't want to come to see or help her and that is why she is always running late. But I have offered to go alone and Meg was always very against the idea, so I wouldn't think this is the case. And he ended it there before update 2. With that new bit of information,
Because I said he's stuck between his wife and his daughter, but she doesn't seem like she cares too much about the daughter. And now that makes more sense.
that it wasn't such a priority. So after he had that update, commenters came in and said even more. He goes on to say for another update, hi everyone, thanks again for all the advice. I read some comments and I wanted to provide an update. My wife finally started talking to me again. When she did, I told her that I want to have a conversation about the situation. but give it a few days to settle down. Some of the comments here gave me a great idea, and I wanted to see what she thought about it. And then he goes on to talk about for future trips, they'll have their own tickets. They'll arrive at the airport on their own. She can take an Uber, like give her own travel time.
Okay.
Um, I let her know it was starting to feel like I needed to keep track of both of us, and I phrased it in a way to make it sound like I didn't want to be controlling over her and let her manage her own time. She wasn't happy with it, but she reluctantly agreed. Now, to get to the bigger issue that I didn't realize we had until reading the comments of this post. Call me oblivious, but I really never thought there was any issue between Meg and Jess. After talking to my wife, she wouldn't admit to any issues and stated that she would never intentionally delay a flight so we couldn't see our daughter. And he has that in quotation marks. And
Hmm.
acted offended that I would ask such a thing. If that was her actual purpose, I don't think I'd be able to prove it, but it will be at the forefront of my mind in the future. He goes on to say that they did have a compromise where Meg will go with them to the parents' weekend, but the dad will now go to Father's weekend by himself. And Meg seemed to be on board with that. So I thought that was a little interesting tidbit afterwards.
Yeah, like he didn't realize that there is actually more of an issue than there was.
Yeah, that there could be. And he seemed to be open to it, but and for the daughter to bring it up first and then then the people commenting saying, "Oh, that's kind of sounds sus," but they seem to have worked it out. So I didn't see another update about where they were now. So I'm hoping that it worked out for them.
Well, and I'm glad that the daughter is, a junior in college. And so it's not like, even if there's issues in it, like in their marriage or whatever, she's kind of grown. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in this situation, I absolutely do not believe I would have got on the plane too for my child, whether.
Well, let me ask you this because you and I travel together a lot. And let's say I had to run to the bathroom and in my panic, my anxiety panic, and they boarded. Would you get on without me?
If your restroom was an emergency, like you said, I have to use the restroom and I'll be back, I would probably try to disclose that. But I guess it would depend on where we were going and if there was an expectation of us to be doing something. And at least I wouldn't want to leave you, but if we had an obligation in a place that we need to be and you couldn't be there, I would feel like it'd be better at least one of us to show up and represent the Suitcase Divas versus both of us miss it. I would hate that. And I would, because I'm the fraidy cat solo traveler. So I would be in a panic the whole time that you weren't with
Yeah.
me. But I feel like if that were the scenario, I probably would go, but I would hope you would understand. That's the thing. This wasn't
Well, I
different.
would. That's why I was asking because it's the one of the things when we travel together, we always talk ahead of time. Like if this happens, we do this. Like we kind of have because we are both two different types of travelers, so
We
we
are.
kind of talk through.
But if you were going to get a Starbucks, that would be different. Because
Oh
if
yeah, you'd be like, "Bitch, bye."
right, I would just be like, why can't you go to the little freaking coffee station right here? If you
Yeah.
have to be bougie and go to Starbucks, then that's on you. You know what I mean?
But
Like,
I think that the key here is this is a conversation you and I haven't had about like what happens if one of the boardings happen and one of us for whatever reason can't be there. We should have that discussion. And now I would say go without me 100%. I would not because I'll catch later. Or if I'm sick or
right.
whatever, I have to deal with it. Don't stop
I
what
would
we're
not want
doing.
to, but I think if it was because my child's waiting for me on the other side, I would go. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like,
yeah, when it comes to that, for
I
sure. I'm
always put
thinking
my
like,
children
yeah.
priority
But
above
it
it.
made me think about like there are situations where something happens and someone's delayed or they just are bad at time tracking and then they're late or you're
And
supposed to
that's
meet
when
each
you and
other.
I, as travel agents, I will say we would not leave 40 minutes to get to the airport. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
we would be prepared with our go bags
Yes.
and
Yeah.
we would be prepared in more time. It sounds like the lady is kind of a bit of a priss and she's not very good with travel and doesn't take it seriously. She kind of thinks like everybody should work around her time.
Right.
But that's not how travel works. And so given that scenario, my biggest takeaway is he's definitely not the asshole, and I think he's a good dad because he wanted to be there for his child.
Right.
So that's what I would definitely take away from that on.
I agree. All
So
right. So what do you have for us, Denise? What's your story that you
okay, so I have a Thanksgiving story because, like I said, I don't know, like, so I don't know if you do a lot of family stuff. We typically spend Thanksgivings. Well, when the children were younger, we would go up or we'd have Nick's parents because my parents aren't here. I don't have a lot of family left, so but being around family and dealing with family stuff, there can be some tension or too many cooks in the kitchen type of deal.
Yes.
So this is the scenario here. And I'm gonna have to put on my glasses. Okay, so Thanksgiving is over and my whole family is mad at me. I need somebody to tell me if I was in the right or wrong. I've been together with my boyfriend, 19 male, for 2 years now. I'm 18 male. My dad's side of the family is very Christian, and some of them are conservative. But overall, we've never had any issues except for today. This is the first Thanksgiving I've had with my boyfriend, although not the first of my family event, is still important to him nonetheless because he really likes my dad's family. We're all talking and playing card games such as Uno, Go Fish, etc. It was a good time. My grandma brought out the turducken, which, as you may or may not know, is a turkey stuffed with a chicken. But where
And a duck, I
I was
believe.
like, "Where's the
Turducken.
duck?"
Yeah.
Okay, that
Turducken.
was maybe
Yeah.
maybe he just doesn't understand what a turducken is because it's not a turkey with a chicken. Oh, there's got to be some duck in there, but let's proceed. And we all wrote something that we're grateful for on the tablecloth as a family tradition. Do you guys do that?
No, we used to do chains with
Okay.
construction paper.
Okay. Um, so it was time to say grace, and I'm not religious, and neither is my boyfriend. We're basically agnostic, but we support my dad's family nonetheless. And we're all holding hands to say grace. My boyfriend's on my left, my stepsister's on my right. My grandma suddenly looked really worried. I asked her what's wrong, and she said she wouldn't tell me. She kind of just did a huff and a sigh and said, I just don't want two men to hold hands while we're praying to God. That's a sin. Everybody fell silent. My boyfriend looked as if he was 11 and just found out that Yellowstone is exploding in a million years. I was speechless. My dad chimed in, bless his heart, saying, Mom, they're family, just the same as stepsister and her boyfriend are. Gender has nothing to do with love and giving thanks. My grandma gave him some excuses she always says when she gets called out on some religious BS. I don't hate gay people. It's just my religion doesn't allow for them, and neither does God. I instantly said, You chose to believe in your religion, so stop pushing it on me. I'll do what I want with my life, and you have no say in it. I yelled this, I think. I'm usually a very quiet person, so this took everybody by surprise. My grandma looked as if she was going to cry. My uncle, who's very conservative, looked at me with very fury in his eyes, saying, I knew you gays would ruin this wonderful holiday. I don't know what he really said because I was so pissed off. I basically just thought it was that. My grandma at this point started crying, and her husband, Grandpa, yelled at me and said, Look what you did. You ruined Thanksgiving. What is wrong with you? And 50% of my family, 50% of the people there agreed with him. Did I overreact to my grandma's views, or am I rightfully angry? My boyfriend is very upset and feels like this was all his fault. Am I the asshole for not doing anything for Christmas this year? Oh, that's a different one. So am I the
Oh,
asshole? He's asking, am I the asshole?
no, he is not the asshole. His family is the asshole there, period. I mean, hard.
Right. I mean, to me, that's a pretty cut and dry case. Love is love.
Yeah.
If you're coming together as a family, you might not always have the same religious beliefs. You might not always have the same beliefs in general, but I think if you're coming together as a family, you need to be respectful for everybody in that family, regardless of who they love or what their religious beliefs are.
Or cut them off. Like, I agree with this person saying, I'm not coming back at Christmas. That, unfortunately, that's the best thing. And it sucks to say that, but for their well-being, they need to
Yeah.
cut them off. And that's the hard part is, one, cutting off family that you love is hard regardless. And two, setting your
I
boundaries
agree.
are difficult, but
Hmm.
we can't be what we've learned is we can't be complacent and just go and make peace. Just keep the peace. No, there's no more of that keep the peace shit anymore.
Yeah, I
There's
mean,
no more of that.
I've had similar situations in my family with not everybody liking the way that my child is, or who they love. Both of my children, honestly, are very different, and so it as a mama bear, it's hard. I don't want them to be treated differently because of who they love or how they are or what their religious beliefs are. So I have had to find that sometimes I've had to set boundaries, and that is what you have to do sometimes. So I just thought that was interesting. And
And unfortunately, it's it's gonna I think it's gonna happen a lot this holiday season. And I
yeah,
support you. I support all of you. If you need to get on here with the divas and have a holiday Zoom, we will
we
do
we
it.
love everybody, and
Yes. You
we're
need to
allies. We're very inclusive here.
if you need to cut family off, you need to not go home for the holidays and we'll host a
That's right.
Friendsgiving Zoom and
Yes.
we'll do that. Whatever you need, keep yourself in good spaces is what we want to say.
Surround yourself with people that support you and
And
love you
respect you.
and
Down,
respect you.
just fucking respect you. Oh, see, I get heated. Let's just let's move on.
All
We're
right, then,
usually pretty
Cheryl.
good about not the F-bombs, but let's
Let's move on to your next story,
okay.
love bug.
But yeah, all right. So this one, this is about ending another type of relationship, but this one is, am I the asshole for ending a 20-year friendship over a vacation gone wrong?
Well, shit. Okay.
All right. So, for context, and I love it when they start off with context. This friend, 27 female, and myself, 26 female, have known each other since 3rd grade. She mentioned the idea of going on a mini vacation together since I'm moving to a new state soon. I let her know that I'd be down, but I couldn't spend too much money on it because I had a lot of moving expenses coming up and would be leaving one of my jobs behind.
Okay.
She agreed that we could do a cheap trip, and I mentioned maybe going to DC or Charlotte since we had friends there we could stay with and would save us ton of money on hotels.
House.
Yeah. She said that she'd really prefer to go to Boston instead, but that she was willing to pay for the hotel since she knew I was trying to save money for the move. Fine. So I went ahead and bought our flights the night before the trip. Oh, sorry. So I went ahead and bought our flights, and the night before the trip, I sent her the breakdown of what her half cost. I really
Okay.
wish they'd, like, use punctuation. This is one
I
long
know there was not punctuation in mine
sorry.
either. And I'm like, I hope I don't sound like an
I
asshole.
know. Okay, so and she responded with, "We'll figure everything out at the airport." The next morning, I pick her up for the airport. We park, get on the plane, and literally as soon as we land, I get a text from my mom that I had some kind of parking ticket mailed to her house that I now owe $375 on, or my license was gonna get suspended.
Shit.
Obviously, my mood immediately went to shit because I wasn't anticipating something like that coming up. I
Right.
got so stressed out that I started tearing up, and my friend at this point asked me what's wrong. I tell her, and she says, "Don't worry about paying for the hotel, I'll cover it." To which I'm thinking in my head, didn't we already decide that from the beginning? And she still hasn't mentioned anything about sending me money for her flight or the parking, and just kind of waits for me to collect myself.
Hmm.
We go start walking around the city. I would also like to mention that this friend of mine is a director at a hospital and makes very good money, and she talks about it all the time.
Okay.
So, anyway, we're walking around and I'm trying to get myself together when all of a sudden we come across a tour. The tour costs $45 with tax, and my friend insists that she really wants to go. Obviously, I'm not in a position where paying that much money feels comfortable to me, but again, I wanted to be a good friend, and so I hesitantly agreed. We get up to the cashier, and the lady asks us if we're paying together or separate, to which my friend responds, separate, super fast and kind of loud. At this point, I totally shut down and couldn't bring myself to fake having a good time. We ended up doing the trip separately the next day, and when we got back home, I sent her a long message about how disrespected I felt, that she never paid me for her flight, that she had zero empathy when I was clearly upset and stressed, and was overall so incredibly selfish. I just decided I don't want friends like that in my life and let her know I didn't think we added any value to each other's lives and it was time to part ways. Am I the
Hmm.
asshole for totally and completely ending this friendship of 20 years over an incident like this?
Well. That
I had
is,
lots of feelings about this, so I wanted to hear what you said.
that this is definitely not a cut and dry, you're an asshole or you're not an asshole, because at the end of the day, I think there was a lack of communication about, how there would be payment. Because you and I float money back and forth. We travel a lot
Right.
together, but we have an understanding of, okay, I'm buying this and then I'll sell you that. And we kind of we communicate well about where the money's coming, when it will be paid, that type of deal.
Yeah.
Um, but it sounds like they didn't really have that. But the thing that draws me to think that this person, they're entitled to their feelings no matter what. But I don't think that they're an asshole for if they really felt like that was the deal breaker, because I feel like there's a little more that's not in this story.
Hmm.
Because for you to end a 20-year friendship over a trip, I feel like you wouldn't do that. I feel like you wouldn't do that. But I do think that the friend that has a lot of money is just kind of cheap, because if she's got all this money and she's not paying you and she knows that you're in an uncomfortable or tight situation where you need the money, then that is kind of an asshole, because I would never do that to a friend, if I know they're tight on money. Um so
So
that
that,
one's tricky. What are you thinking?
well, I honestly think the OP, the original poster, is kind of the asshole in this situation
Okay.
for a couple reasons.
Okay.
I think she does have, I think there's more to the story here with this friendship
Mhm.
because she goes on to talk about, well, one, she never set boundaries. She never set clear boundaries
There's a
and
lack
set,
of
and
communication.
she's blaming the friend for making her do things she didn't want to do. The friend never made her do these things. The OP was not comfortable in her own way to sit to draw her own boundaries and say, I don't want to go on this $45
Right.
trip.
And they're in their 20s. I get that.
Yeah, they're both over 25. So they're
Okay.
closer to 30 than they are their 20s. They should
Right.
be. And if you've been friends for that long, you would think you would be able to say, go do your own thing. So I think the OP blaming the friend for her having to do these things is incorrect. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
and
yeah, if you
she's
don't want to
not
go on the
taking
tour, don't go on
accountability.
the tour. But I feel
I
like we've
also
all kind of maybe done stuff that we didn't want to do because our friends wanted to do it on
Well,
vacation.
I think compromising is different than blaming someone for making me
Right.
do something I didn't want to do. That to me, that's different. If we
Yeah,
compromise and I'm like, okay, well, you really want to do this, we do that a lot when we travel because one, we both like different things.
we do.
So we'll do things the other likes, but we also go off and do our own thing. Like I don't
Yes.
make you do anything that I know you don't like, but
Right.
you don't stop me from doing the things that I like. Like
Correct.
that's a supportive friendship and a
That's
supportive
good.
travel
That's
partner.
that's called a real friendship.
Right. But the one thing I didn't like is they were on this trip and she got this crappy news about this ticket and she let it ruin her entire thing. She'd already invested this money on this trip. There's nothing she can do about it other than cut cost, but she still didn't do that. She still blamed the friend for making them go on this trip. Um, so I kind of blame, and I think maybe, I don't know why, I'm not siding with the friend, but I feel like the original poster is irritated with the friend in some way. I think there's more to the story, and I think this
I
was just kind
agree.
of like the
I think that there has
icing
to
on the
be
cake.
more to the story,
Oh
because
wait, there's an update. Oh, I forgot. Let me see what the update said.
oh, Jesus, let's get to that.
Yeah, at the end of the trip, I explicitly asked for her to pay for her half of the flight. Oh, okay, now this is a little different. And she told me no because she had a terrible time due to my lack of enthusiasm and was therefore justified in not paying.
Ooh, see, I don't agree with
I
that.
don't agree with that at all. No matter what you commit to, you pay what you pay.
And at the end of
And
the day, it's not my job to make you have a good trip. You know what I mean? Like, even if
right.
they weren't, even if they were on the
Both
same
of them are
page,
blaming the other for
they
having a
seem a
crappy
bit
trip. Yeah.
immature. They seem a bit immature
Yes.
for being in their almost 30 or
But I
20
think when
something.
you are friends with someone, when you grow up with someone, because they've been friends since third grade, sometimes I think you revert back to who you were as children, like because you're comfortable. I've seen that. I'm not going to say it because, I've been with my husband since I was a teenager, and we have very teenage behavior sometimes when it
Hmm.
comes to arguments and
Well,
stuff.
and you tend to hurt the one you love, and and that happens too. So
Yeah.
maybe their friendship, because they've known each other for so long, it's almost more like a sibling thing than a friend
Right.
thing. You know what I
I
mean? Like
hope
you
that
treat
they
them.
discuss it because you and I've had discussions about how sometimes the smallest thing can break friendships and they need to have communication, which you and I always, no matter what, we're like, hey, we need to talk because we value this and we want to discuss it.
Right.
So,
So it sounds like the original poster doesn't really value that friendship, or like we're both saying, there's got to be more to this story
yeah.
than just this one weekend trip that deserves
So
20 plus years of
I'm thinking
marriage.
they're both
I mean,
assholes
friendship.
in the big picture of this. They both did not handle it well. I think they had some tension going into the trip. And
Mhm,
also with her moving away, it might have caused some hurt feelings and they're not discussing it. Like there could
mhm.
be so much. We could analyze this. Dr. Phil this
Yeah,
together.
there's definitely more to the story, but I
Yeah.
in that scenario though, I would be kind of pissed that I bought the tickets and she
Oh,
didn't pay
for
me back for it,
sure.
because that's
Yes.
not cool.
There's
You know what
no
I mean? Airline
excuse.
tickets are not cheap. If she already owes another 375 or she's going to get her license revoked, I can understand being like, listen,
Even if she didn't have a financial issue,
but it sounds like
you
the
owe
other
it,
girl
you owe
has
it.
money and she's just choosing not to pay.
Well, I wanna know if that's come up before because I don't like how she put in there that this person has this big job because that shouldn't matter. Just because if someone does make a lot of money or has a lot of money, doesn't mean they have to spend like they do. This person may live frugal and just like and only splurge on certain things. So how much money they make should not affect what they spend
Right. But
for
she can't
themselves.
fucking pay for her own plane ticket. That's what it comes
Absolutely.
down to. At the end of the day,
We could pick this apart because I think there's a lot of red flags in the whole
right. I agree.
post
But
about their friendship.
I don't think she's an asshole. If she wants to end the friendship, obviously she didn't value it for whatever reason.
Right.
There was a lot of things that went wrong in that scenario, but the friend does owe for the plane ticket, and I would
Oh,
be
for
kind of pissed
sure.
too, you know?
Absolutely.
So, all right, we're gonna move on. So this one is interesting. This one is about Christmas. And I will say, as your children get older, it's really hard to come up with Christmas gifts. So, and I'm trying to like, as the travel agent, I'm like, let's go on a trip. And my kids
Yes.
don't want to go on a cruise. I'm like, what the fuck are we gonna buy for the? As like, send me your Amazon list. And
Yes.
Reese's like, mine might be like groceries, gift cards to grocery stores. And I was like, whatever, if that's what you want. Because Reese is like, being an adult is hard. You guys did not prepare me for being, you guys made it look so easy. And I'm telling you, it is not easy. I'm like, no, it is not
I
easy.
remember when Brienne asked me for a vacuum for the first time, and she's like,
I,
I
I love
saved her text, and
physical
she
gifts.
said, I can't, she said, I hate this part of adult, something like that, where I'm now asking for household goods as Christmas gifts. It was just it was like, oh, you're adulting now because
Yeah,
that's when,
Santa's over. That's
yeah.
real world, honey.
All right. So what
Um,
you got for us?
okay, so she says, I'm a stay at home mom with 3 kids. My husband works full time and gets an okay salary, but he's tightened the grip on spending for the last 4 months to be able to save up and go watch a football event overseas. He's literally obsessed with anything to do with football. I can relate, honey. I really can. He said he rarely ever gets to do what he wants. So I don't judge him since this is his money eventually. Like he's paying for the trip with his money. We discussed plans for Christmas, and he told me to handle everything since he won't be back until December 20th. He told me he had put aside money for Christmas. Oh, and I guess that didn't print. But let me just tell you what happened. So essentially, so it didn't print the rest of the story. So essentially, the story is, so he left money in an envelope. And so when she went and got the envelope, it was only $100 total.
How
And
many kids do they have?
3, but it
Oh,
doesn't say their ages. So she was pissed and she said, you're spending all this money on this football trip and you left us $100 for me to do Christmas for the family.
mhm.
Fuck it, I'm not doing it. She's like, I'm just telling them there's no Christmas this year and you used all the money for the football game. And she said he was furious, and he said that I wasn't trying hard enough and I should be able to make it work. $100 is plenty to get some gifts and blah blah blah. And she essentially said, no, that's not enough money. I'm not doing anything. And then she's like, am I the asshole for refusing to have Christmas and try to come up with a Christmas for my children on $100? So I think that's interesting. What are your thoughts?
Oof. She's not an asshole in her feelings, but you don't screw over your kids
That's
to
what I'm
screw
thinking.
over your husband. Like, you stick it
And
to
you
him,
can
you
come
don't
up
stick it
with
to
some,
her.
you, especially depending on how old the kids are. I would not give myself any gifts, I or my husband. I would take that
Right.
$100 and try my hardest to give the children
I'm
as much as.
assuming they're older because she said she's going to tell them dad went off to and spent the money for
You'd be
them to
surprised what some people tell their children, regardless of age. But
oh, well, that's true. So maybe, but either way, I think she should have done the best she could with the 100 for her kids and her their little nuclear thing, and been honest if they're old enough to understand this is why it's different than every other year. And there were some red flags in that where it was he spent his money on this, he tightened our budget so he could do this, and
well,
like
so
it
she
was
said the whole time he was sending her angry texts, being like, "I can't believe you're not coming. I can't believe you're not doing this. What's wrong with you? You're ruining Christmas because you're not making an effort." Meanwhile, he's off in some other country, fucking watching football and probably drinking beer. So
I would say it depends on the age of the kids. If the kids are
okay,
still in the magic stage, you make it magic no matter what, because money really isn't the gifts aren't that when they're that age. It's all to me, for me, because we were
I know because
young
you see
and
kids at a Dollar Tree and they're like, "Oh, this is so great," and it's
exactly. You can make it magic for
right.
your kids. If your kids are older, then I would say, "Hey guys, we're just going to have a killer dinner and this is why." Like I don't believe in hiding things from your kids, but I think there
Right.
are levels like you said depending on their age. And I think it really depends on whether what age her kids were at the time, whether or not she's the asshole. If her kids were young and she just kind of shit the bed on Christmas, then she's the asshole to her kids, not to
I
her
agree.
husband.
But
That
I
would
do
be
think
my
it comes
take on
back
that.
to a lack of communication again. You know what I'm saying? Like why
Absolutely.
aren't we talking about there's an envelope with $100 for Christmas? Like that, I would be
Yeah.
wanting to know where that money,
And why
where
are you waiting till the week before Christmas or in December? Like I
I
didn't
know.
wait till late.
So
I mean,
there was definitely a lack of communication there too.
yeah.
That's what these all start with. A lack of communication is never going to end well.
And when you travel, what we've learned, and I'll save the other ones that we have for another episode because I think we've gone long. I love these chats,
And
but
time is money.
yeah,
So
I think that when you travel, and what I liked about the first story with the husband wife is I see this all the time. There are two types of travelers, the type A and the let go with the flow, and they marry each other. Like
mhm.
it's very interesting how that works. But I I think when you're traveling, being aware of the type of person you're traveling with, which is what we talked about with Donnie from Girls Guide to the World,
Right.
and having clear communication and expectations, know what you're
Yes.
expecting.
Yeah.
With the family one, you can't prep for that really. I mean, you know who your family are, and you have to just again communicate your boundaries. And then we support no contact. So
Yes.
communication is huge, knowing who you're traveling with and knowing your boundaries are big. That's where we
Yes.
are. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then just obviously when traveling you do have to practice patience, like you just have to
Yes.
suck it up, get there early, and if you have 45 minutes at the gate, then do whatever you need to do, scroll on your phone, read a book,
You can totally watch a whole episode of a show in that before you
listen
get
to
on.
Suitcase Divas podcast. I mean, there's plenty
Yeah.
of things you could do. But okay, well then that kind of wraps up this day's
Yeah. Tell us what you guys think in the comments on our you can comment on our I'm learning this. You can comment on our actual feed in Spotify and things like that. So leave your comments and tell us what you think about our who the asshole is in these stories.
yes,
Let us
would
know
love
what you
to hear
think.
your feedback as well, always.
Yes.
All right, guys, well have a great
Safe
day.
travels. Yep.
Bye.